Hi, friends. Once again, it's Jim Freeman with another interview with one of my friends that I've worked with recently to help a senior who needed some help pretty badly. My friend here, her name is Molly Erickson, and she is from the grand city of Forks, Washington,
Yes.
which, if you didn't know, was the site where the Twilight movies were filmed some years ago.
Not filmed, but that's where the story took place.
Well, that's where the story took place. Okay.
Yes.
And so that's what we know about Forks, other than it's good fishing and nice place to live. Pretty far away though. And the senior client that she and I worked for had owned a home in the Port Angeles, Washington area. And you weren't in the guardianship business at that time. You were doing something else, but why don't you explain a little bit about that?
Well, I had previously helped some senior friends over the years as a power of attorney, but I met this Jenny, I'll call her Jenny, but I met Jenny. She was in a nursing home facility and assisted living, and I'm a volunteer ombudsman with the state of Washington, and as that I'm a residents' rights advocate. So that's how I met Jenny.
Okay. Well, so what is an ombuds person? What do you do when you're doing that?
It's a program that resolves issues at the lowest possible level. So I am certified through the state. There's a significant training that goes through, but we go into facilities, and if we see issues, the way the facility is being run, or if we get a complaint from a resident or a family member, or even the facility calls us in to help resolve issues at the lowest level. And if we can't, then we'll call in the state. But a lot of different people can call us in, or if we see something, but we are the residents' rights advocate, so it's the resident we'd be working with. And I did meet Jenny when she was in a facility, but she moved herself out back home.
Right, and so ombuds people have a certain authority from the state to intervene or report or try to resolve conflicts or problems in a community. But one thing I've learned about ombuds people is that's not all you do. About maybe half of people who are living, particularly in advanced care communities, don't have visitors very often, do they?
No, they don't. So you become friends to a lot of folks because we're in there to make an appearance and to check things out on our own, but you get to know the residents too. Right.
And I understand they're quite grateful to have a human being show up that comes, not rarely, but occasionally, and just talks to them, and listens to what their life is like, and maybe reminisce a little bit. So thank you for that, and all the other ombuds people that do that. That's a work of that's a calling, not a job, I would say. But anyway, so you met Ginny this way. Ginny owned a home, and she wanted to move back. So what happened there?
Well, her previous power of attorney was in the process of trying to sell the home, and Ginny was online with that, but the last minute of that process, she decided to check herself out of the nursing home, or the assisted living, and move back home. And it was a very unsafe situation for her, not only living home alone, but the condition of the house. But she, after she'd been there a short period, she called for help on another matter, and that's where I learned she had moved herself back home. But so I was helping her for quite a while with that and her. She was on hospice at the time, so her hospice nurses and I helped her stay at home.
So what was what was the condition of the home that made it unsafe? Why was it not a good idea?
Well, at that time, she had lived in the home for over 15 years before she went into assisted living, but she had never done any maintenance on it. So there were 3 accesses to the home, and 2 of them, the steps were completely rotted and broken through. And so she used I called it a chicken plank, something that would go into a chicken house. It was a narrow board.
Some slats nailed to it.
Yeah, I think it did have slats.
Yeah.
No handrails at all. And she was in her early 90s at this point. And so my number 1 volunteer, my husband, went in and rebuilt her steps. And she also had plumbing issues. The toilet would run all over the floor, and took care of that. And the ceiling of the kitchen was leaking, and so he put a temporary patch on that. So
Right. I understand he did a lot of lawn mowing and cleanup
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And you guys were driving all the way from Forks, Washington, where you live, to Port Angeles frequently, which is what, an hour and a half maybe?
well, round trip probably but it was 50 miles from our house.
Right. So long distance, not easy to get to, and particularly in an emergency. And so she was living in this home, the roof leaked, there were plumbing problems, place was just not maintained, because when you're 90 years old, how can you maintain anything? And an interesting aspect about this is that she lived there for, you said, 15 years, and for a long part of time, maybe from the beginning, she had something called a reverse mortgage, which allowed her to own her home and live in it, and she was not obligated to pay any mortgage payments, principal and interest payments on the loan. She still had to pay her real estate taxes, insurance, and then utilities. But how long did that go on, and how did that work out for her?
Well, when I became involved, she owed the reverse mortgage company something like right around $200,000, and it was a modular home on a nice acre lot, but the county at the time had it valued just over $200,000. So she didn't have any equity in it to do any repairs or anything. So.
But on the other hand, she didn't have to make any payments, so
Correct.
So she could use all of her income for her living expenses and
Right.
medical care.
Right.
All right, so she lived in the home for a while. It wasn't really safe, and she had been in hospice.
She had, but she has outlived her hospice and doing pretty well she's now 95.
Right. And but at some point, somebody noticed, things were not well, and she got a hold of you and asked you to help. And then how did that lead to you becoming a guardian?
Well, I need to back up a tiny bit, but as an ombudsman, we're residents' rights advocate. So even though nobody felt she should lead the assisted living, it's her right to make poor decisions. The folks in her life were trying to cushion her, but she did have a fall outside, and by that time, she had lived in the home for about a year, but by that time she was declining mentally, and I did try to get some kind of legal guardian through the state for her at that time. I didn't expect it to be me, but after she did fall and was in the hospital with this fall, the hospital would not release her until she had a guardian. And so they initiated a
Petition for guardianship?
petition for guardianship through the state. and during the process, she had a lawyer assigned, and the lawyer went through all the process of trying to find a family member to become her guardian, and nobody wanted to do that. She did have family locally, but for various reasons, nobody was willing or able to step up. So I was asked, because I was an advocate for her through this process. It was at COVID, and the hospital designated me her person who could come in and visit. So I went in regularly and visited and tried to keep her cheered up. But anyway, I ended up being considered for guardianship, and that was granted through the court.
So you were appointed by Superior Court in Clallam County,
Yes.
and this was a totally new experience for you. You'd never done this before, exactly. And I imagine there were a lot of surprises along the way.
Quite a few.
Yeah. So a guardian in the state means that you stand in the place of the individual who you're a guardian for, and you have a responsibility for their care and to execute decisions for them in some cases. But you took over responsibility for paying her bills and trying to get her into a community that she would accept for care, and that's a lot of work. Later on, because the home was vacant for a while, you had to make sure that that was safe and secure and preserved. That, here you are driving 50 miles one way to take care of that. So you put in a lot of time and effort, and it came to a point where I guess maybe Jenny accepted that she needed to stay in a home some distance away. Maybe she didn't, but that's where she was going to stay. And what happened then? What did you have to do?
Well, she did move into an assisted living, back into the same assisted living from the hospital, and was pretty comfortable there. The hospital and the state determined that by that time she needed a dementia facility, and so the facility agreed to take her. They weren't set up to accept Medicaid patients in their memory care unit, but at that time they had to wait 6 months to get certified for that. But she did have a great community there and was pretty accepting of it. At that point she did want to go back home, but we couldn't find anybody to stay with her, and she could not be there by herself by that time. So eventually it came where she deteriorated and couldn't stay at that facility anymore, so now she's been moved to a Medicaid memory care unit out of the county.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that, and from what you told me, she seems pretty well there. She's being cared for.
She's being cared for. I won't say she's she loves her room. She would like it if I would move in with her, or if I would move her to my house, and that isn't possible. So there's a part of her that's not happy, but she's very glad to see me, and we wish it was closer, but we're looking for a place where she can move back to the county and be closer.
Okay. All right, but at some point, you determined, or maybe the court determined, that the home needed to be sold and her personal belongings disposed of, and something had to change, something had to happen.
Well, yes, I always thought that my helping her I wouldn't have to deal with the home. There weren't, she had a lot of memories in the home, but not a lot of, there wasn't a lot of quality things there to worry about, and not much value there, but there was a lot of stuff, and some of it was just plain not worth keeping. But it did come to the point where we had to sell the house to get it off of her. You know, it showed up as an asset for her, and when she did use up what little savings she had, she did go into Medicaid. So I was forced to deal with the house.
Okay.
and the property.
All right. And so we had a lot of stuff in the house, and there was some outbuildings that were full of stuff, lots of stuff. And I didn't help you at that point, but I could have. But you dealt with some estate sale people and cleanup people, and you managed to get your way through that process.
Mm-hmm.
And how'd that go?
Well, I won't mention any names,
No,
but I did originally, I was gonna sign up with a company that would give a real itemized account of everything, and it sounded really good on paper. They were going to, Ginny would get 70% of the sale items. And I was about ready to sign that contract and read the fine print, and I would be guaranteeing them that they would make $4,000 on the sale of the personal property. And there was just no way there was $4,000 worth unless we sold the appliances to the building. And I did consider that, but when I realized that that wasn't feasible for us, I did find an estate sale company in Port Angeles that went in, and I think they gave us, it was a 40%, they took 40%, and I didn't get the itemized list, but the court did approve that after they had previously approved the other one. But because everything we did, I had to go through the court to get permission for it.
Right. And so there were some other complications with this property. It had a septic system, and somebody at some point in the ownership of the property had built a deck over the septic tank. And so there were some issues with that. And the roof leaked, and these stairways were not particularly safe to get into the house. So there were a lot of deferred maintenance that had to be done. Certainly was not a ready to move in type house.
Right.
And you were able to maneuver through the personal property part of it. And then we got connected somehow. And how did that happen exactly?
Well, through the Ombudsman program, we have we go through training once a month, and you were giving a training presentation at one of my monthly meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, this has nothing to do with the Ombudsman program, but I've got some questions. You sounded too good to be true, but turned out.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I've never sold property before. I was really terrified that the house had, I thought at the time, I thought it was worth $6,000 to Ginny, because her reverse mortgage, she owed $200,000, and the county at the time said it was worth $206,000. So, and Ginny had no resources, and I had no resources to kick in. I was helping making payments, but I didn't on some of her bills till I could figure out what to do with the house. And I think I had a couple of discussions with the DSHS about the house, and one of the folks I spoke to, I told them I wanted to give them the house and let them worry about it, or give it back to reverse mortgage. And the person I was talking with made the comment that I better find a lawyer because I could be held accountable. If the state didn't get their money, it would go to the Office of Financial Responsibility.
Which is something you didn't really know about.
I didn't know at the time. It was one of many things I didn't know at the time. I had agreed to be guardian.
All right. So my partner and I had made a presentation at the meeting of ombuds people, and you connected with us, and that's when we began our discussion. So I came up to the home, and I met you there. Did some preliminary research, got a preliminary title report, sorted out some issues with the reverse mortgage, and gave you my opinion about an evaluation of what the property might go for. And you know, to be honest with the audience here, I didn't think it was worth as much as we eventually got. And but I did know the steps to take to get the maximum that we could, because our goal always is try to maximize the asset value for the senior so that they have something left, you know, for their care. In this case, it was further complicated by the fact that she was under Medicaid care, and they have very restrictive rules about how much a person can retain when they're receiving Medicaid. And the reverse mortgage was very beneficial for Ginny for the time that she lived there. She basically lived there, you know, payment free for many years, which allowed her to use her income, her meager other income for living expenses. And but the clock was ticking. Every month that went by, there was more interest added to the balance for the payoff, and the house wasn't getting any better. Nobody had any resources to fix it, and you just found out that you have to do something with the house, or you know, maybe you're going to be in trouble with the state. So what do we do then?
Well, one of the things that gave me hope when listening to your presentation was Ginny or we didn't have any resources, but you have folks that many times could go in and do repairs to a house and wait and be compensated after the sale of the house. And that was a huge opportunity for me if this property fit that. So that's one of the reasons I was very happy I could go with you. But the other two was I had tried to contact the reverse mortgage company on several occasions, and they just never answered. I could not communicate with them at all, and I felt, with my limited knowledge, I needed to talk with them for some insights on what to do next. So you stepped in and really took over that part of it, those parts of it.
Okay. And we eventually sorted out, you and I agreed upon a price that we should ask for the property. I did some research, I put some documents together, and we put the property on the market as is. We didn't really do, you got the personal property out, but we put it on the market pretty much without any improvements prior, which is not the easiest sale in the world, and it's not one that is leading to maximizing the sale price. However, based on what we did and how we did it, I believe we maximized the amount of money that we were able to put in to Ginny's guardian account at the end when the sale closed. And as we went through the process, describe a little bit what happened and how we dealt with things.
Well, we went, first of all, I'm not sure you were as happy with the price that I wanted to ask for, because it was a lot more, but by that time, the state had told me that the county had updated their idea of what the property was worth, and it was a lot more than the 206,000. So that's what I wanted to start with, because I wanted to show the state that I did my due diligence trying to get what they thought it was worth, even though I didn't expect it to sell for that. So it was on the market for a little bit, and I called you up and said, okay, I'm ready to drop it. Drop the price, because nobody had really been firmly interested in it. And by that time, you had said that you were now not ready to drop it, because you had some ideas.
Well, we had, the initial response in the first 2 weeks of the marketing period were a bit disappointing. We didn't have any showings. It was kind of crickets, which bothers me when that happens. But maybe after 2 or 3 weeks, we started to get some traction, and the marketing efforts that we put out were beginning to produce some results. And we eventually got some showings. I showed the property myself, and we talked to a lot of prospects. And to make a long story short, we eventually ended up with a total of 3 offers, and they were in a wide range, and they had different capabilities as buyers. But we were able to get pretty fair price, I would say. We don't need to go into details about that, but I think it was fair. And,
yes.
And the amount that we were able to get was enough to pay off the existing mortgage, and there was some left over, actually more than the state would allow Jenny to take. Mm-hmm. If she's going to continue to pay, be supported by Medicaid. But you had invested some money of your own money, which I think is highly unusual as a guardian. But it's a pretty substantial amount of money for you and your husband. And because we were able to get the additional price, you were able to recover that.
Yes.
Which was important.
Yes.
And I personally don't believe that anybody in your position, particularly with all the work that you do, and the relatively low reimbursement you get for your time, that you should be at risk for losing money for trying to support your senior. But you did that out of you cared about your client, and you're using what you had to make that senior comfortable and to make her life better.
Yes, I didn't expect. I was really pleasantly surprised to get the funds returned, but that's. I'm not in the guardianship business to make money either. It was. But
you certainly don't want to lose money.
No,
if you don't have to.
But we're my husband and I are blessed, and we feel we're obligated to help where we can, and so we do. But
all right. Well, we eventually went under contract with a buyer who was very, very pleased and anxious to acquire the property. It worked for them. They were the most financially qualified, and they had the right type of loan. But it didn't end when we signed the agreement for them to purchase it. We had some twists and turns along the way. And why don't you talk a little bit about that, if you would?
Well, I'm going to have to remember all the twists and turns.
Well, you don't have to remember all, but just give a description.
One, we agreed upon a price. Well, I think it's really interesting how the house sold, because these folks had a low bid coming in, but they had an escalation clause where they would pay $2,500 over whatever bid we had gotten,
Up to a cap.
up to a cap. And one of the bids the one bid that we had taken was a pretty high amount, close to our asking price. But we were really nervous that they were actually not going to be able to perform, but we had their bid. So you presented that bid to the third party, the eventual buyer, and it turned out that the bid we had was very close to their cap. So we accepted their offer. And
They paid up to the cap.
correct.
Roughly.
Correct. And but after the inspection, there was more damage than they had anticipated, and they asked for a $5,000 reduction.
Mhm.
And I felt that was fair, and as did you.
I did.
And so we extended the closing, and then we had the septic pumped, and the fellow who had pumped it 3 years prior when it
Actually, he hadn't pumped it, he had just inspected it.
okay,
Yeah.
inspected it 3 years prior. It was the same fellow, so his report was essentially the same, that
Mhm.
described the sunroom had been placed over the
Over the tank.
septic. And you had provided them with that 3 years prior report.
Right.
But when they got the new report, they were very
It frightened them a
concerned.
little bit. Yeah.
Yes, they went to the county, and I don't know that they talked to the person in charge, but whoever they did talk to painted a really bad picture, and threatened them that they weren't going to get a permit until the sunroom was remedied.
Mhm.
And so,
So we went through some more negotiations and on price, and we lowered the price a little bit to take care of that problem.
Mhm.
And then we had an appraisal problem. The appraiser couldn't get out there very quickly, and so we had to wait for that. And when the appraiser's report came back, the appraiser said, oh, this is a manufactured home, and in the state of Washington, you're not supposed to attach structures to the exterior of a manufactured home without an L&I permit, and nobody had ever gotten an L&I permit. So the appraiser required that an engineer come and inspect the premises to make sure that whatever was attached wasn't going to have it fall down. And I worked with the selling broker, and between the two of us, we were able to find an engineer to get out fairly quickly. That was a problem, and eventually that turned out all right. And then with a few more delays, we eventually got to the closing table. And how was that?
I think that was one of my first really good night's sleeps in a long time.
Well, the point I would like to make, is that we had problems, and believe me, all transactions have problems. There isn't one that doesn't. But we just kept at it. We kept working on it. It was great working with you because, after I explained things to you and why it happened the way it did, you pretty much understood everything, and I think you were able to make good decisions based on the information I supplied you. That eventually helped bring the transaction to a successful close. So thank you for that. That's not always the case. But this, in many ways, in my experience, was very similar to an estate sale, although the owner was still living, because we had a lot of issues to deal with, legal and otherwise. Do you feel like I was able to help you understand those legal issues and get the right experts for the right problem we had to solve?
Yes, I really felt that I didn't have to worry, that somebody else was
Taking care of it.
taking care of it, really.
Yeah, and that's what we do. All right, so you're still a volunteer ombudsman, I think.
I am.
And you're now maybe thinking about further guardianship work, which I hope you do, because I learned recently, Molly, that there's only 250 certified guardians in the state of Washington. And there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of senior individuals that need guardians. And it's very, very, very important work. Not a lot of financial reward, frankly. So it's really a labor of love. And many thanks. And I'm pretty sure that some guardians will be watching this interview. So thank you all for what you do. And for those of you who are maybe in a point in life when you're not as busy as you used to be, and you have a feeling for the needs of seniors and what happens to them, and you're willing to put out a little bit of time and effort, I'd encourage you to consider it. I also understand, I'm not an expert, so I could be wrong here, but that people who are not certified, those that have not completed the course at the University of Washington, can have up to 2 guardianships that they administer if they're appointed by a court. So there's still a process you have to go through, and oftentimes it's much better that it's not a family member. You know, it's somebody that has an objective view of things and is able to really help the senior in need in an objective manner. But anyway, thank you all for what you do, and for those of you who might consider it, please look into it. You know, if you want to call me or contact me about that, I can help you a little bit. Would you do it again with this one? Sell a house?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well,
but especially when this complicated, it's really you need somebody experienced. Yeah. I'm not that experienced yet.
Well, now you've had an experience, and so you're experienced. Well, again, Molly, pleasure working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope we get to do it again soon. And thanks for all the viewers who are watching. See you soon.